Please your attention. We want to start the last round of being so privileged of knowing such an abundance ideas that you have placed before us and really deserve much more time and much more room for not only digesting it, but of discussing it and conversing about it. I would start with only one thing that I have been shivering with while listening to you, your description of your youngster's experience of looking at this picture of this girl with this hollow look and gaze. And you are saying that you was feared of it, and you were scared by looking to this hollowness of human being, which is stripped off his humanity by this disastrous event of the atomic bomb. And I thought to myself that in looking at this photo, you are kind of witnessing the disaster of this young girl, even if decades later. And in the opportunities that you are giving to us, it's a kind of an offering that we can look at this face, at this horror, and witnessing it, even if it's even some more decades later. So thank you for that very much.
Okay, thank you. So it is my final presentation of in Israel. Well, everybody came to me and said that I should speak shortly. my presentation is pretty long because we don't have so much time. So then I prepared many, sentences, but then I skip all the theoretical part. I just focusing on case material, case presentation. But I just to briefly tell you what my point is. Naomi, I just want to read the very first part of the paragraph. Sorry. Psychoanalytic work most often occur through narrative. The patient describes his or her experience in narrative form, attempting to create order out of chaos, and using narrative as an organizing principle. The analyst listeners listen to the narrative and pieces together, scraps of information of all stores, also from the patient accounts of his or her daily life. Patient and analyst observe and attach meaning to these scraps, and then create stories with spatially structures and temporary consistent plot. I would like to suggest, however, that analysts' preoccupation with the theoretical models and the formulation of analytic narrative can be limiting as well as liberating. By examining the concept of surrendered narrative, I believe that we can expand the possibility of analytic diet. But I skipped the review and discussion on the surrender and the narrative. Okay, then yes. This is a case, and in the New York, it's Yukiko. Okay. Yukiko consists of two Chinese characters. The Japanese, very popular Japanese name, Yuki, means snow. Ko means, the child, but it's the Japanese people like to put the ko for the woman, sometimes in the name. So Yukiko is a snow lady. I just, it's not a real name, of course, and I name it because the snow scene, a dream, appears in this topic. Yukiko was a photographer in her early 30s. She entered 4 times a week analysis on a couch in order to deal with her fear of intimacy. She had a few friends, only some professional colleagues, and her social and private lives were separate and isolated. It was approximately 3 months after beginning her analysis that I found that Yukiko was falling asleep on the couch. For a few months after, I would wake her up and ask her to explore what might make her do this every session. She did not seem reluctant to accept my request. She often suggested an idea of her own about her sleeping, but still she would end up falling asleep in the midst of talking. All my effort to keep her engaged and awake would fail, even though, to the best of my knowledge, she had no physical problems that would cause her to fall asleep, nor did she have any medical history of narcolepsy. Instead, she said that she had had no previous experience of falling asleep unawares except for in her sessions with me. My dilemma was compounded by Yukiko's complaints of deflation of her creativity. She came to my office. It is a New York's office. It came to my office and lay on the couch. And the first 5 minutes, she, as usual, she, began talking. Then 5 minutes left, she stopped talking. And I, behind the couch, I was waiting for her words, but no words at all. Yukiko? No answer. What's going on? No answer. I get the sounds of her snoozing. So, she's asleep, that kind of things. And I was waiting, and 5 minutes before the end of the session, she suddenly woke up. And, it is time to finish? The kind of things. So 4 times a week sessions. Every session. So what should I do? It's not easy, actually. Maybe you think that easy job is just to listen, just sitting down behind the couch, but it's not easy. And I just, what's happened? Think. And it was an interesting experience to me. Okay, so my dilemma was compounded by Yukiko's complaints of deflation of her creativity. She's a photographer. She claimed that she could not reach the essential part of her artistic sensitivity. That whenever she tried to take a photo, no feeling or artistic sense came to her mind. She felt that she had almost forgotten how to create a picture with her camera. The more I attempted to explore her falling asleep, the more she complained about the loss of her creativity. I felt helpless and powerless and distressed with her lack of control and mind over her sleep and wakefulness. My understanding at that time was that Yukiko needed to withdraw from the outside world, including me, by shutting down all stimuli. I felt that she was afraid of being intimate with me, that my queries, empathic comments, and interpretations were experienced by her as overwhelming indications of intimacy, and only served to increase her fearful expectations. The story of her relationship with her mother underwrote this perception. Yukiko's mother, having the minor paranoid tendency, maintained that all people in the world operate with malicious intent. For her, people are untrustworthy, their minds filled with intrigue and conspiracy. She criticized her husband as having a dirty will, which often made him into a sexual monster. When Yukiko was a little girl, she accepted this perspective. But she came to know that her father was simply not concerned about the human world, dirty or pure, sexual and asexual. He lived in an emotionless world with no space for creativity and the arts. He was deeply self-absorbed and did not speak any meaningful relationship with his family. My understanding of Yukiko's need to withdraw helped me to create a space in my thoughts. While formerly I had been desperate to analyze the meaning of Yukiko's sleep and had learned through the numerous influences and the theories, now I no longer pushed. I did not feel that I had to wake her up immediately and discuss her falling asleep. I let her sleep as long as she wanted, typically about my 30 minutes. Sitting behind the couch, I spent the time alone with my thought and listened to her breathing. About a year after I stopped pushing to understand it, Yukiko's sleeping in the session ended. She also resumed working and actively devoting herself to the photo business. She talked about her way of photographing an object, saying that she always waited for the moment of nothingness. She began by consciously determining how to shoot the object and carefully check any technical issues. Then she banished her self-consciousness and threw herself into the moment. If she successfully brought herself to this condition, the moment of shooting came to her. But now, she said, I was not able to banish myself. I waited for the moment with my camera in hand, but I slide into my consciousness. As long as there is a sense of I there, I cannot shoot anything. Even after she stopped sleeping in session, Yukiko often had a period of silence, frequently for minutes at a time. When I asked her to tell me how she felt during these silences, her reply was ambiguous. I don't know. My mind was just empty. If I had not experienced a year of her sleep session, I would have aggressively analyzed the state. I try not to explore it as actively as I might have done, and I allow her to make time for silence. It was not easy to me. I try to stay with her, keeping my arousal and the physiological state at a low level. As long as I kept myself in this state, she also stayed calm and felt easy. Toward the end of the third year of her analysis, she said to me, "Silence is silence. If you want, it is okay to talk about this, but I think that it is a waste of time. Don't focus on the silence." One day, Yukiko told me about a dream in which she found herself in the snow-covered town where there were no other human beings. Houses, trees, roads, and all other objects were blanketed with snow as far as an eye could see. In the dream, she was excited at the prospect of taking photos of a scene because she could see the real faces of all objects, because all things are covered by snow. I wondered if, through this dream, Yukiko would struggle to capture the essence of the word, the essence of her aesthetic. She needed a space which was not contaminated by her mother's paranoid filter. For her, language, explanations, interpretations were not the pure white like a snow-covered world that she saw in the dream. They were all potentially contaminated by her basic mistrust of the world. As long as she was asleep or in silence, she could feel secure enough to capture this essence of the word. In other words, she attempted to move through nothingness toward essence. I finally recognized that my effort at interpretation and a narrative exploration were not helping, may have been meaningless. There was no story to be found. I had stopped thinking and let go of my search for an immediate explanation. For the last year of her analysis, Yukiko no longer fell asleep or maintained notable silence in session. And I found that unique rhythm had emerged between us, organized around matched pause. As she finished talking, almost simultaneously, I stopped thinking, and my mind became empty for a short time. This is unusual for me. Typically, as I listen to my patients, I sense that my brain is working actively and processing all the information I obtain from their narrations and behaviors. Toward the end of their speaking, my brain actively rises to the climax, and then immediately after their finish, I give them my thoughts and feelings. But in relationship with Yukiko, we both achieve an empty moment simultaneously. I found myself not thinking anything. If I had not experienced her sleeping in the silence for the first 3 years of analysis, I could not have recognized and accepted this phenomenon. In one session, Yukiko talked about a short trip she had made with a male colleague at the web company request. She was nervous and felt uncomfortable being with him for the whole story all day. As she began to talk, I found my brain working very hard. What was it she wanted to say through this episode? Was she expressing the essential conflict? What did she expect me to say? As usual, I constructed the story in my mind for each issue and attempted to articulate the highest priority at each moment. Intimacy with others, trust for others, or yearning to share some feeling with me. In this case, however, as Yukiko finished the story, and my thoughts slowed down and came to a stop. There was a pause. The pause was very short, but our communication and my internal activities are both suspended. Probably her level of internal activities went down. After this, Yukiko began to feel more comfortable and more like herself when being with others. She developed a good reputation in her field and no longer feared that her creativity was being contaminated by thoughts of others. She said that the sense of art in my soul is uniquely my own, but it helps me to connect to the world and others. The sense of art is everywhere. She terminated analysis after 4 years when she was offered a good position with a larger company in another city. So I just a little bit provide some, my, understanding of this case process. Working with Yukiko shows how deeply as her analyst, was focusing on formulating narrative. We as therapists are so busy and every day so busy organizing and formulating narratives the patient talk about. This is our job. We created the story. When I face her sleeping in the silence, I automatically searched for a meaning by attempting to create a story, to construct a narrative that could explain how sleeping in the silence came to be organized in the therapeutic process. When I constructed this kind of story I refer to the plot points in her childhood, her professional work, a dream, and her therapeutic interactions. I piece the information together so as to make it spatially structured and temporally consistent, but all my efforts only seem to further an anguish. By contrast, I did not review the meaning of surrender or the emptiness, but maybe you can tell what they are. By contrast, what would it have meant to surrender myself to Yukiko's emptiness? It had meant not constructing a story or freeing myself from my preoccupation with formulating the narrative. The process I am describing is not about finding a non-narrative story, finding a meaning in Yukiko's non-narrating. It is about relinquishing narrative altogether. This stance of surrender helps me to find a way of working with relating to Yukiko. Of course, I also recognize irony that in sharing this case in a coherent fashion, I have, in a sense, imposed a narrative framework on my work with Yukiko. The narrative process of case formulation is nevertheless taking place in hindsight and such is different from the moments of emptiness that I have described in my work with my patients. In Western analysis, we are trained to find what it is that transpired during the interaction. Even when we encounter the silence of the pause, we seek to understand what meaning it might have. But as Yukiko's case suggests, the psychological process can often be organized around the moment of emptiness. A Bionian analyst Boris maintained the importance of tolerating the notion of nothing in the psychoanalytic process, pointing out that for many analysts, including Bion, there is no such thing as nothing. In response, Boris criticized the traditional analyst's necessity for seeking the meaning or presence of absence in silence or no actions. He says, one's own capacity to tolerate nothing quickly becomes an issue central to the analysis. If one can regard the torment and experience as the hateful fact, analysis is possible. If one succumbed to the temptation to replace nothing with something. Well, sorry, I just have kept talking from yesterday. When one soon is out of the analysis business and into transfusion business. Boris' notion is innovative and helpful, but his emphasis is still on the analyst's ability to accept absence or nothingness rather than emptiness. Emptiness is neither absence or nothingness. It is nothing, and everything is the essence of the word. We can see the good example of Yukiko's case, how original silence was not emptiness, but nothingness. Silence organized in the context in which she left herself free from non-recognition by her father, the malignant paranoia of her mother. That was her pathological accommodation to that perspective. But Yukiko's and my letting go of our search for the story and immediate explanation about her silence was, instead, a moment without context. If it had been our effort to accommodate to her silence, she would have needed to protect herself from my preoccupation with searching for the story. How can we describe an intersubjective field in which Yukiko accesses the essence of the word or essence of aesthetic? I believe what dissolved the analytic impasse in Yukiko's case was our surrender to the moment of nothingness, as she called it. This is her word. For her, words and memories are contaminated by other people's perspective, mostly her mother's. The essence of a human relationship for her could only be created through the process in which we both renounce the necessity to formulate narrative. Yukiko, an artist, seemed to know how to create essential moment. She also knew how the moment had the potential to create a secure and trustable word. In other words, the moment included the essence of the word, the human relationship. But by relinquishing our attempt to think, explore, and analyze, and focus on her psychological condition, Yukiko and I surrendered. In this presentation, I have attempted to expand against the idea of surrender, especially in relation to emptiness. Surrender can be to emptiness, the moment without context, in which neither the sense of being, a living experience, nor meeting with the other has yet emerged. Surrendering to emptiness allows the analyst to go beyond spoken and unspoken narratives, or formulated or unformulated experiences, to be sensitive to the essence of the word. For me, emptiness does not refer to the special moment, but can be found anywhere in the psychological process. It can be felt anywhere we allow ourselves to accept the essence of the word. In the spontaneous conversation, a narrator does not deliver fully constructed and plotted narratives, and moment by moment does not know exactly what he or she will say or how it will be understood by the other. Narrator does not know which elements in the ocean of memory will surface in the next moment and become part of the story. In the dialogue, no one can predict where narrative will go. Narrator can only let go of his or herself and take in the moment as it is. If narrator or the listener attempt to process all available information, he or she must fail to capture the essence of dialogue or relationship, because they limit infinite possibility of the moment. In this sense, emptiness does not only appear in a sleep, silence, or a pause. It can also occur in a normal dialogue. In Yukiko's case, the moment of nothingness was the center of therapeutic action. In this stage, she could transcend the guilt of being, which came from her fear of contaminating me with her basic mistrust about the word and being contaminated by my personal view of the word. All mental activities and intersubjective process was stilled, yet within this stage lay a great potential for creating the essential essence of our relationship: trust, sense of security, sense of selves, subjectivity, our interactions, and her creativity. Emptiness emerged prior to analysts and the patient awareness of their identity, this sense of self and their professional, therapeutic, social, and cultural rules. Emptiness may or may not be embodied in the silent space, but it does not have temporal consistency or spatial structure in itself. It may reside at the center of anything in analytical relationship. It does not have anything, yet it can create anything. Thank you. I just a little bit. Let me add a very simple story. this is the reason why I wanted to write this paper. It's a long time ago. Self-psychology conference, maybe United States, I don't know which city. I attended. Someone presented a case. In this presentation, the patient made many, pause and silence in the session. The analyst was very, it's a pretty big trouble for the analyst. The analyst want to analyze it, but the patient did not want to talk very much about our story. It's American therapist and American patients. And after it's a plenary. So after the plenary, we are going to the short, small, discussion group. I attended, and they're so busy to discussing the case. They are so fascinated by the case, but they want to focusing on what the silence means. I said, maybe silence is silence. There is no meaning, maybe, but wow, it's great, Koichi, you're wonderful. It's a very Eastern perspective. So the silence means nothing. So this is the Western perspective. They eager to find some meaning even in the silence. So this is the stories behind my writing the paper. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice work.
Yeah.